Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the World Crypto Network. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We have a great show for you guys, ladies and gentlemen, today. Really excited. Lots of good stuff happened this week. I mean, you know, with Bitcoin, sometimes there's a little bit of a slow week, but even in those slow weeks, we have a ton of news. Super proud to talk about the panel, to introduce the panel that we have today, guys. But before we do that, as usual, let's go ahead and cover the quick pick section real quick as fast as we can so we can get to the topic. So first, guys, I just want to quickly announce that I do have an LA talk coming. I have a talk that I'll be talking about Bitcoin in LA coming up on, I believe, June 1st. Yes, June 1st. So I encourage everybody to check that out. As always, guys, the link for that and everything else will be in the show notes below. So come and see me in LA. It's going to be fun. I'm going to be giving a talk about who controls Bitcoin. So it should be pretty fun. Maybe a little bit of a hint. It's not Roger Ver. Okay, and then next story, we got another investor. People are suing XRP. So, you know, when you have a centralized token, a centralized company, centralized system, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get people suing you and, you know, all that fun stuff. So check that out. Then Square sold $34 million worth of Bitcoin in its first quarter on its Square Cash app. So people, there is a demand for Bitcoin. More and more people are wanting Bitcoin, and we're getting more and more places to buy that Bitcoin, you know, with all these different applications coming out like Square. And then now we have Peter Thiel's founder, the founder fund, Peter Thiel's investment fund, actually invested in a company called Tagomi, which is a new startup that helps big investors trade Bitcoin. So again, just more demand for Bitcoin, and now not just in the trading, you know, but actually for OTC as well. And so big investors are now stepping up, really wanting to get Bitcoin. It's really going to be a point where where it's going to be risky to not own Bitcoin. So that's going to be a realization that's going to come pretty soon, I would assume. Then we got a great story, guys, again from Aaron. Amazing article about the future of Bitcoin, what Lightning could look like. Really awesome story. I mean, it really goes into depth on all the latest features and developments that's happening in the Lightning Network world. Check that out. That was on Bitcoin Magazine. And then the company of Vaultoro. Maybe you guys have heard of this. I guess they're a gold company where you can actually buy gold with Bitcoin. They actually implemented Lightning payments for their stuff. So check that out. Really interesting stuff. I'm actually in contact with them to try to get them on the show to talk about their process with that and their thoughts on Lightning. So stay tuned for that. Should be a good show when that comes around. And then finally, there was a funny article that's going around. It's pretty great. You know, I tweeted it out. It got like 1,000 likes or something. But, you know, it is official. Dogecoin has more transactions than Bitcoin Cash. And recently, it's really interesting, guys. Recently, because of this, they've actually begun pivoting away from their fast and cheap payments, right? Now they're starting to pivot into the store of value. You know, we got the @Bitcoin account tweeting out things like, serious question, why is BTC a better store of value than BCH? I mean, it's just ridiculous stuff. And we got Roger tweeting out stuff like how Bitcoin, you know, Bitcoin Cash increased a little bit faster than Bitcoin, so it must be a better store of value, right? Not because it crashed and was down for many months. But, you know, interesting stuff, guys. Check out these stories and more with the links below. And without further ado, I think we can get right into the introductions and then get to the topic. So as always, guys, thanks so much for joining us. I really am proud to bring you these guests and bring you this news and bring you this information every week. First, we're going to introduce Mr. Andy Hoffman of course, from here, World Crypto Network. Andy, how you doing?
Great. And this is a great all-star panel to be on. I'm happy to see Jack is healthy. And of course, just let that sink in, people, that Dogecoin, which no one owns and doesn't do anything, does more than Bcash.
Yeah, funny stuff. I mean, they're going to keep switching their narrative, and we're just going to keep laughing. So interesting stuff, guys. Joining us back again. It's been a few weeks here, ladies and gentlemen, since we've had the greatest Bitcoin person in Canada, right? Mr. Francis Pulio from Cadillac. Francis, how you doing?
Oh, hi, Vortex. I'm doing fantastic. It's a great day outside. It's spring in Montreal, finally. The sun is out. Bullish as always. And I think we're going to have a really great show, great topic, and yeah, great panel again today.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, last time we saw you, Francis, I believe we had a view of the outside of your office there, and holy smokes, it was like 6 inches of snow out there. So yeah, it looks like a winter wonderland. Glad to hear that you are back in the spring now. As with the rest of us, you never know with Canada, you could have snow in July. So thanks again for joining us, Francis. And then of course we got Mr. Jack himself, Jack Mallers, who was recently had a bit of a tumble there, and we're just all pulling for him, and now it looks like he's back in action. Jack, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. As long as I have a second to, the community was fantastic to me. It was very overwhelming, all the responses and the thoughts that were sent my way. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk on the show, but also really want to say thank you. It really meant a lot to me. So yeah, I'm happy to be back, man.
Absolutely, Jack. Yeah, I know. I saw the tweets, man, just fly in when we found out, that your mom tweeted that out. And there must have just been a bunch of replies there. I know I replied one. And it was just really great to see the community, kind of pull for you and all come together, and really hope that you make it out okay, Jack. So really glad to see that you are happy and healthy, sir, as usual. Really great to have you on the show again. So again, guys, that was Jack. If you guys don't know him yet, you better freaking learn, because he's programming one of the greatest Lightning wallets out there right now called Zap. So check that out. And then finally, last but not least, there we go, Mr. Pierre Richard. Pierre, the greatest freaking shit talker on Twitter that I've ever seen in my life. Mr. Pierre Richard, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for the kind words, Vortex. I'm down here in Austin. Just had brunch with some awesome Bitcoiners. So ready to continue talking Bitcoin.
Absolutely, guys.
I thought I was the biggest shit talker on Twitter.
It's a tie, man. It's a tie. But Pierre's got that.
A lot of competition.
Pierre's from the Nakamoto Institute, so he's got all the. He's got a little bit, maybe more ammo than the rest of us.
Yeah, so. Co-founder Nakamoto Institute. Go to nakamotoinstitute.org. Read all about what Satoshi wrote. Obviously, don't worship it too much, and also go to noded.org. NODED. Where I co-host the Noted podcast. We're also syndicated on World Crypto Network. So if you're already subscribed to World Crypto Network, don't bother subscribing to Noted.
Awesome. Thank you, Pierre. Glad to have you on the World Crypto Network. A very awesome show. I try to tune in every single time. There's just so much information, and you guys have great guests on. So thanks for that, Pierre. I know the community is quite happy with that podcast. So hopefully you keep that up. All right, guys, without further ado, I think we can go right into the topic. So let's go right into the first one here. Unfortunately, the actual creator of the BTC Pay server couldn't make it this evening. We were actually going to have Nicholas on, but there was a bit of a scheduling conflict. But I still wanted to talk about this amazing program, BTC Pay Server, because it really is this open source alternative to BitPay. And I wanted to maybe tell the community a little bit about it, describe a little bit about it, because this is open source software, and this is amazing open source software, guys. This is available to all. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Let's go with Francis a little bit, because I know Francis has a lot of good stuff to say. I think he's actually used BTC Pay Server in the past and used it to integrate into a couple of companies. So let's ask you first, Francis. What do you think of BTC Pay Server, and maybe you can explain a little bit about what it is.
Yeah, so BTCPayServer is an open source project which is developed by one of the Bitcoin core developers, Nicolas Berrier, which has been also developing the entire kind of .NET library, and he actually wrote a book on like programming Bitcoin in .NET. So he's a very, very well-known developer, also working in the payment processing kind of space as well with his other companies. And BTCPayServer is the solution to a lot of problems that Bitcoin applications and Bitcoin companies are facing, which is it's actually quite difficult to integrate Bitcoin when you're building it from scratch, right? So I've done that with Bills. So with Bills, like all our kind of Bitcoin integration is 100% custom and in-house, but there's a lot of things involved, and it took us like years and years to build it. Just the process of generating an invoice and presenting it to the client involves a lot of stuff, right? So first of all, you got to derive the addresses in the right format in the right way from the right seed, going to the right place. Then you got to present the invoice to the user. Then you need to have some kind of callback or webhook or Explorer to tell you when the Bitcoins have been received, and then they need to go somewhere specific. And then you need to handle the invoices and then the fiat conversions and then all sorts of stuff that you need to build out. And that's just for receiving Bitcoin payments. So if you're doing that from scratch, it's really, really difficult. So what basically people end up doing when they're doing that is using all sorts of third-party APIs, right? So using companies like BlockCypher, the Blockchain.info API. A lot of companies actually just use the BitPay stack completely, entirely. I actually met like payment processing companies that were just reusing BitPay's entire stack because those things take care of all of that for you. And it's just, using Bitcoin just becomes using a bunch of APIs that are plugged into your web application, right? And you're just connecting, BitGo, for example, is the thing that everybody uses. So what happens if you want to you know, what happens in the case of UASF and SegWit2x and just full node sovereignty, like if you're a merchant, how do you do that on top of your own full node, which is a big problem using software you entirely control? Well, that's what Nicolas has done, right? So what Nicolas has done with BTCPayServer is it's an open source project that it basically does all the stuff that you would need to code into your application in order to accept and use Bitcoin, which is everything is modular, everything is out of the box. The infrastructure is kind of like a microservices architecture using Docker, where you have, you know, your own Bitcoin core, full node with all sorts of other stuff running on top of it, like the .NET Bitcoin Explorer and all sorts of .NET libraries on top of it. And then you have also the kind of merchant tools that are open source on top of it. So you have like your own like dashboard, and you can customize your invoices. And what this allows people to do is to deploy in like a few clicks, really on Azure, the entire infrastructure that you need. So your own full node, your own kind of servers on top of it, your own API. So you have like your own API, your own Explorer that your app is connected to. And the endpoints of this like API are exactly the same as like BitPay's, very standard with what Coinbase does and the other block explorers do. So it's like you have your own block explorer, your own kind of set of merchant tools, and all that is open source. So what he's done is given people the ability to have like the highest standard level of quality software, but running it independently, which is absolutely fantastic. So this reduces dramatically the development time of any Bitcoin application without having to compromise on any trust, right? Because you're still using your own full node and your own stack, and everything is open source. What's really cool about that also is like they're actually doing a lot of effort to kind of distribute this software. So they have like a WooCommerce integration and a plugin. The development is insanely active. Like, so they have like other coins as well, but they also have, you know, Lightning Network already built in, right? So they have, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I don't make a mistake, but I think it's Lightning Charge on top of C Lightning, which works with BTCPayServer. So it's out of the box. You can accept Bitcoin, all sorts of shit coins, and most importantly, Lightning Network in your WooCommerce app. So I'll just give you an example of like how easy this is. So this is not free. So in the sense that it is free to use, but in order to implement it, you need to kind of be a developer. So you need to be able to launch it or something like that. So if you have like a store and you're selling socks and you have no computer experience, it's not exactly a plug and play solution, because specifically also if you're accepting, you know, Lightning Network payments, you need to have a full Lightning node, which is online all the time. But it's about, you know, I would say for a good developer, it's like 10 hours of work basically to, that's kind of how I estimated it. Of course, there's some other stuff to think about around that, but it's about like 10 hours of work. And just as an example, so one of my friends contacted.
Hold on.
Yeah, sorry.
Real quick, Francis.
But I had my little story to tell. But
exactly, I want to get to that too, Francis. So we will. So a bit of a tease. Yeah, so Francis definitely has a bit of a story about BTCPayServer, but I just wanted to just quickly take a quick break and just recap a couple things, because you know this really is some interesting software. This is completely 100% open source. You know, they have Lightning support out of the box using the Lightning Charge API. Again, this is a completely open source payment server for Bitcoin that runs with your own full node. So this is basically a BitPay replacement. This literally allows you to be your own BitPay and create more and more BitPays as you see fit. So this really is a pretty big project. The main purpose was actually to be a replacement for BitPay because of all the shadiness that BitPay has been doing lately, you know, with BIP70 and with you know, supporting 2x and all their crazy stuff with their huge fees that they were charging recently. You know, they had some ridiculous fees. And so this was really meant to replace that, you know, because the API was copied almost exactly. So if you are using BitPay, the integration to switch from BitPay to this is actually very, very smooth. It'll be very, very smooth for your developers. And again, the goal for this was never to make a profit. It is open source. The main goal was for people to be able to take this and use this and make their own profits. So, and one final thing about it is you actually can use it with Azure and AWS. So it's really great. They actually do have a one-click setup. Now that's a one-click setup for a developer, right? With a bunch of configuration stuff beforehand, but still, they are making it really, really easy. And before we go, Francis, to your story, us maybe get some thoughts from Pierre on this, or first Pierre, then maybe Jack after this. But Pierre, you're a developer as well, and you've been doing some interesting things with your project with tracking the various Bitcoin GitHub properties and things like that. So maybe your quick thoughts on BTCPayServer and how you think if you think this is a big thing and maybe why.
Yeah, perhaps most relevantly, I worked at BitPay for a year back in 2014, 2015, and I think that BTCPayServer really shows the strength of the open source model, which is that BitPay should have open sourced their core platform and essentially gotten a lot of free development work from engineers, but also got a lot of improved, architectural approaches. Because one of the big issues at BitPay was that they were using, for example, just basic stuff, like they were using MongoDB, which is terrible for financial transactions. BTCPayServer uses Postgres, which is the best relational database out there, and that's perfect for financial transactions. So that's just like one thing. And then the other aspect is BitPay would still be able to make a large amount of money if their core platform was open source. I don't think their competitive advantage is having a proprietary core platform. Their competitive advantage is being able to interface between the Bitcoin world and the fiat world. And they do that because they have compliance. And so part of the issue is that when their compliance team says no to a merchant, that merchant needs to have an alternative. And so BTCPayServer is a fantastic alternative for people who, for good reasons or bad reasons, fail to meet the requirements of the compliance team at BitPay. And then the other thing, too, is that we want to have a vibrant ecosystem of Bitcoin payment processors that are interfacing between fiat and Bitcoin, because it's kind of hubris to think that BitPay would be able to do this in every jurisdiction around the world. Like, different jurisdictions are just going to have different regulatory environments, and so you're going to have different companies that specialize in different areas for different currencies. So I think that having an open source model where they can share the same core software while focusing on what their competitive advantage is, which is geographically specific compliance and having banking relationships. And then the biggest side benefit of that is for people who do want a trustless environment where they don't need fiat, they can have a core platform that they run themselves. And so, yeah, I think BTCPayServer is a fantastic project. I wish that BitPay had gone down that route. I think that would have helped them out a lot. They burned a lot of money hiring engineers to work on a subpar platform. And I think that they would be a much healthier company and a much better influence in the ecosystem if they had gone down the open source route from the beginning.
Absolutely. Great comments on there, Pierre. And people don't realize like how fast code rot actually sets in, like the rotting of the code. I mean, when you're building this bleeding edge financial software stuff and you have to pay millions and millions of dollars, that's what they're doing instead of going the open source route. They paid millions and millions of dollars for all this development just for it to pretty much rot over the next year or two, because it requires so much upkeep, and Bitcoin changes so fast, and there's just so much that's going to come at them. So yeah, very interesting comments, Pierre. I really wish BitPay would have gone down the open source route a bit more than they have. Agree with that. Let's go to Jack. Jack, what do you think about this? And again, man, just so glad, it feels so good to see you again and see you be healthy, man. Thanks again for coming on the show. We appreciate it, Jack.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I thought both Francis and Pierre's answers were fantastic. I actually got a notification, Slack notification. I'm working with Nicholas on trying to make Zap and BTCPayServer user experience very seamless, and we've been talking about different ways that we can kind of address the consumer, and as we bring this to a more consumer facing environment that is Bitcoin, with Lightning and stuff like that. And the notification was fork BitPay, and I look at my phone and I'm like, what? I don't remember being subscribed to any BitPay related service, and I realized that was actually BTC Pay, and that was Nicholas. So I guess the only thing I would like to address that hasn't been said is the origin of this project is really inspiring, and I'm very proud of that too. And I think Nicholas should get a lot of credit. This was out of that S2X. There's a lot of frustration with BitPay for years, but it sort of peaked. And this project shares a lot of properties as Zap, I think so. And the type of inspiration of open sourcing a repository and getting a community behind and motivated and involved in, the next like level and layer of Bitcoin that has Lightning Network and merchant adoption, and not allowing these TTPs, was the Nick Szabo famous quote, is trusted third parties are security holes. So not necessarily a security hole, but, a company like BitPay or Coinbase can essentially hold users at ransom, as a third party. So I think the grassroots of this project, and out of frustration, open sourcing a repository, getting the community behind and involved, and creating a solution where we're not so beholden to, a centralized authority, is great. And I think Nicholas deserves a lot of credit, and I'm excited to work with him and hopefully get some mainnet merchants on the Lightning Network, and have Zap allow people to be shopping with merchants and consumers to be connected. So I think it's a great project, and I'm excited.
Very awesome, and that's great to see the direct integration between these community members, like Jack with his LN wallet, his Lightning Network Zap wallet, and then now Nicholas's BTCPayServer. This is just great to see the community have these huge goals, but yet such humble beginnings. Again, these guys just coding this stuff because this is their passion, this is what they believe is going to be the future. And so this is just exciting to see. Lightning is just continuing to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. Every week there's thousands more channels and more nodes, and we see more transactions. And so it's really great to see the progress, and we're getting these really great articles, like from Aaron, and I never pronounce his last name, but Aaron Van something and great articles from him on Bitcoin Magazine, and I think he even has a couple on CoinDesk about Lightning. So more and more integration is great. So let's quickly ask with Andy's thoughts. Andy, I know you're not of course technical or things like that, or a developer, but I just want to maybe get your thoughts on what you think about this kind of this community support, with this ongoing development, with all this stuff continuing to make Bitcoin better and better every day. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I mean, we think about last year, how many centralized nodes there were, or just centralized factors. We were worrying about Bitmain running the mining operations of the world, and now China is not slowly but rapidly losing market share to all parts of the world, making it less centralized. And this is the same thing. I mean, right now, not many people are using, or merchants are using it to pay for anything, because it's such a good store of value. Why would you want to? But what we have is a giant mess. I mean, I use Stripe for my business. Stripe just got rid of Bitcoin acceptance, which they were doing through BitPay. BitPay, as we know, is a bad actor because they were supporting Bcash all throughout. So as far as I'm concerned, they're on the blacklist of the Bitcoin community, yet they were the biggest payment processor. So I'm thrilled to not only see a level of decentralization, but again, open source decentralization, where even nonprofits are coming in and taking away from what BitPay just a year ago had this monopoly on. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Great points, Andy. It is great to see the community come up and try to decentralize this more, because BitPay, like you say, Andy, had a huge amount of a monopoly almost. I mean, they were like the only, still almost remains one of the only major Bitcoin payment processors. So I hope that more and more companies adopt this open source software like BTCPayServer. And then let's go to Francis then. Francis, maybe we teased a little bit about some people that are using BTCPayServer. Maybe you can fill us in on maybe somebody else that might be using it.
Yeah. So, but just first, I just want to say how cypherpunk BTCPayServer is. If you're looking for the definition of cypherpunk and people that build the code so that others can free themselves from the shackles of their oppressors. I mean, that's really awesome. And BitPay's influence, for really people to understand how deep it goes, is a lot of apps, as I said, were using BitPay as their backend. So other payment processors and not just merchants, Bitcoin debit cards and all that kind of stuff. And also people were using their core software, their open source software, which was Bitcore, which a lot of people built on top of really early on. And that thing just went to shit so badly. Now I think they just started to develop it again. Maybe they realized the pressure of BTCPayServer. But so when BitPay decided to do No2x, then you had tens and tens and hundreds of businesses that were suddenly No2x as well, other payment processors and other gift card vendors and stuff like that. So in the future, BitPay won't be able to hold, like, to get all those companies on board as leverage if they can free themselves. So in Canada, like one example, like CoinCards, that's a Bitcoin payment processor. They've fully integrated BTCPayServer in the backend, and they're not now like adopting Lightning Network. But so the story is for BTCPayServer how easy it is to integrate. So I had a meeting with a really nice up-and-coming luxury startup from Montreal, and we were just having dinner, and our friend was having dinner, and they told about Bitcoin and Lightning Network, and they're like, oh, this is so awesome, this is so awesome. So we're like, okay, so how can we make this work? And they're like, oh, you want to hold the Bitcoin, you want to keep the Bitcoin, you want to have Lightning Network as soon as possible, we want this in the next 3 weeks. And I'm like, no problem, BTCPayServer is there. So now what we have is we're going to integrate, the BTCPayServer in their platform, and we're going to launch it and do a really nice promo that we thought of is, so we're going to create a luxury item, a really nice luxury item, which is Bitcoin themed, and it's going to be extremely limited edition, and it's going to be purchasable only using Lightning Network mainnet transactions. So that's going to be a really, really awesome luxury thing. And we're thinking—
That is amazing. That is amazing,
so
Francis. Keep going.
So for example, I think we'll probably also give discounts to people if they make a testnet transaction on Lightning. So these merchants are super on board because they see this and they're like, I'm going to be an early adopter of the next best Bitcoin, the new version of Bitcoin that everybody's updating to. They're like, well, I wasn't in Bitcoin before, so I don't need to update anything. I'll just get into Lightning right away, and I'll just, get onto this wave. So yeah, so BTCPayServer is a tool for people to be able to implement that. So if you know of a company that's like, hey, I want to, implement Lightning, must be super, super hard. Well, no, it's not super hard. I mean, what's hard is once you have the Lightning Network coins, what you do with it, that's the hard part. But accepting them really early on is super easy. So that's two really good use cases of what Nicolas' work has empowered people like me and these guys to do.
Absolutely awesome. So you're telling us, Francis, that there's going to be a super rare collectible item that's going to have Bitcoin insignia on it that is only available for purchase via Lightning.
Yeah, so I can't announce it yet, but I will
that's cool.
Definitely share it with the community, and that's going to be really, really awesome. So we're thinking of ways, so how to get people that are not into Lightning to get involved in Lightning. So that's one. And the other thing I'm definitely going to do in builds as well is just give discounts to people if they test out Lightning testnet. Just give discounts to people, get them to open channels with you, and try to get people that are even not in Bitcoin at all to get into Lightning right away.
Absolutely awesome. Other companies are doing that as well, like TorGuard, the service for having a VPN. The VPN service is doing that as well, where they'll give you a discount if you use the Lightning, because they just want to get this. They just want to see this thing develop, and so that is really awesome to have this enthusiasm behind all this, the back end of these companies and things like that. Very cool, Francis. So looking forward to that. Wondering, hopefully you can share what the actual product is soon and who creates it. That's going to be pretty fun. So very, very cool. I think we can move on to the next topic unless anybody has anything else to add on this. No? Okay, very cool. So again, guys, check that out. BTCPayServer, completely free, open source, amazing software, guys. Just another example of this amazing Bitcoin community out there that is going to continue working, continue decentralized, and continue evolving this community and Bitcoin itself. So very awesome. I think we can move on to the next topic. But before we do that, please, guys, if you are new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button below. Otherwise, if you like what you're seeing, give us a big thumbs up. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something here today. We try to get the word out about Bitcoin every Sunday and do this show every Sunday. So and next Sunday, actually, we do have DeSantis scheduled. So if you guys want to trip down the rabbit hole with Mr. Robot himself, definitely recommend coming to the channel next Sunday to check that out. Should be a fun, great interview. So without further ado, let's go ahead and move to the next topic. We're going to start out with Andy on this one. Andy, so Goldman Sachs basically said that they came out and admitted that Bitcoin is not a fraud. So that's pretty cool. And they actually first announced that they were going to do a Bitcoin trading desk, but then they kind of said they've delayed those plans in favor of some kind of derivative. Maybe you can give us the updated story with that, Andy.
Right. It's sad that I've had to spend my entire career talking about Goldman Sachs, and JP Morgan, arguably the two worst firms. You have to go back to like the East India Company in the British Isles that terrorized the world to find a company worse than these two for what they've done to the world. And I mean, but yes, they are major players in the financial world. Of course, I thought that one, it's very interesting that they contradicted each other for the first time. JP. Yes, I know Jamie Dimon went back on what he said earlier about it being a fraud, likely because the price went from 5,000 to 20,000 right after he said it. But never do you see these guys stand against each other. And the reason is, of course, profit. Just like Jamie Dimon will get him JP Morgan back in to cryptocurrency because he sees profit. Goldman Sachs, of course, sees profit. And because they didn't have a CEO stupid enough to say it was a fraud, they can go right at it. And so, look, they bought Poloniex. You could say whatever you want about who they bought it through, but they own 40% of that firm that bought Poloniex. That's Goldman Sachs calling the shots. They know that there's profits to be made, and that's why they got into the altcoin business. And I think it's fantastic. The more competition, the better, the more liquidity, and the bigger players, the better. And as for this trading desk, again, it's a perfect example of crypto noise. Look, Bitcoin is unbelievably undervalued. It's never been more undervalued. The fundamentals have never been better. The price had a jump as it should. And it coincided with around the time where Goldman Sachs was talking about this trading desk. So everyone, particularly the mainstream, the zero hedges of the world, say that's why. But the fact is, Bitcoin needs to go up, and it went up. If Goldman Sachs is starting a trading desk where they're doing proprietary trading of crypto, that's fantastic. But this news that they are not actually doing trading, but derivative crypto trading like futures, really is no different. It just means that for now they're going to emphasize a different part of the market. I think it's inevitable that every financial institution in the world jumps into the cryptocurrency arena, and the ones that do it early are the ones that are going to make the most money.
Awesome. So let me ask you this then. So Andy, this is no different than basically the CME futures and how they're operating, is what you're saying, like a derivative instead of the actual underlying asset itself.
Yeah, and I don't even think Goldman Sachs actually made an announcement. It's always like someone said that they said this, and then it gets out on pro-Bitcoin sites, and then anti-Bitcoin sites say, no, they didn't really say this. But I mean, let's face it, they are the reason we have CME futures is because firms like Goldman Sachs were lobbying for it, all of them, because they wanted to make money. And right now the market is down a little, so you see a lot less talk. But the fact is that Goldman Sachs did just buy Poloniex. I mean, you couldn't have a more ragingly bullish statement than that. And this, what's going on with this trading desk, are they doing it or are they not doing it right now, is really noise. The fact is all institutions will be in, and you will see the futures volumes continue to rise, just like you'll see the underlying Bitcoin volumes.
And of course, we have the halving coming up pretty soon. So it seems to me, Andy, that all of these companies like CME and NASDAQ and Goldman and on, JP, they all need to get in before the 2020 halving. And what do you think about that? And then also, what about the news with NASDAQ? I know we heard something about them getting into it. Do you think that they'll get into it this year as well?
Yeah, the thing with all those firms is they would prefer, like Jamie Dimon, that Bitcoin did not succeed, because they are insiders into the fiat currency regime. They are the primary dealers. They are the companies that get the 0% interest rates. They are the trading desks that aid the Fed and the president's working group on capital markets and doing their day-to-day open market operations. So they get all the insider trading profits and the free money. They would love if Bitcoin didn't exist, but the fact that it exists means, and that they can't ignore it anymore, that they are going to go whole hog into it to make as many profits as they can, and they're going to look to open as many exchanges and have as many products like ETFs and NASDAQ traded futures as possible. The one thing I will say is that ETFs is something that I don't believe is going to come anytime soon, because that is one of the few areas where the government truly can push back on Bitcoin by saying no. Because if they say, I mean, look, futures is one thing, because that's just like trading bets on what Bitcoin will do. But ETFs means huge amounts of supply will get sucked up. And I don't think that the SEC wants that to happen. But these firms, as long as they see profits out there, they see, Bitcoin at 10,000, they see altcoins going crazy, they are going to put as much of their resources as they can into it, especially because the legacy markets are way overvalued and they really haven't been going anywhere for a while.
Yep, I definitely agree that the legacy markets are insanely overvalued, and of course, gold never goes anywhere. So, very interesting comments, Andy. Let's go with Jack next. Jack, what do you think? Do you think that the ETFs are a long ways away as well? And what are your comments on Goldman?
Well, I'm super excited that Goldman has made it publicly known that they are going to be involved in Bitcoin, and it's a long time coming. I mean, anyone that sat and listened and believed that Jamie Dimon was going to keep a way distance and that Goldman was going to keep its distance from Bitcoin is out of their mind. The demand was there year in, year out, the best performing asset to hold in your portfolio. And I honestly think everything is according to plan. So when they talk about the rumor of trading, a futures product as opposed to the underlying, one of the really main issues in these institutional investors getting involved right now is actually holding the Bitcoin. They need a custodial service to hold it. Goldman is not going to buy $500 million worth of Bitcoin and put it on a Trezor. They're not educated enough. That scares them a lot. And, a lot of these firms are trading on behalf of others, and client money is not going to sit comfortably on a private key. And, as very early adopters and cypherpunk mentality, we are very comfortable with that. And we see the pros to that. That scares them. And there's a lot of services like BitGo and Coinbase that are coming out with custodial, vault type products. But that's a huge dire need in the industry. And as far as ETFs go, in my opinion, that is the one major flaw in a Bitcoin ETF, if it were to be launched today, is that if the Winklevi were to have an ETF, where do they keep all the underlying, where do they keep all the Bitcoin? Where do they keep the billions of dollars of Bitcoin? If they keep it on a Trezor, I mean, they're putting a huge target on their back. How you secure that amount of Bitcoin is a huge deal. So, what firms like Goldman can do now is they can trade the CME product, which is cash settled. So they don't actually have to touch Bitcoin yet, but they can still get involved in the industry. They can offer it to their clients, and they can, provide liquidity and get their feet wet. So in my opinion, it's all according to plan. Andy, I forget your numbers, but I love when you tweet them. It was like the $100 billion level, $150 billion level of Bitcoin market cap is when these institutional players step in. They're starting to get their feet wet. And yeah, it makes sense that they want to trade cash settled first until it's clear how large institutions can hold client money without having to use paper wallets or Trezors. So I think it's fantastic. And I think it'll be a huge influence on the price over the next 24 months. I think another topic is $250,000 Bitcoin. Firms like Goldman and ETFs, that is how you get an asset in the trillions of dollars that people are really using to hedge against fiat systems, and clients can leverage them to buy up Bitcoin. So
let me ask you this, Jack. So you mentioned one of the major hurdles, of course, for these ETFs and for these classic institutions, these legacy Wall Street institutions, is actually holding the underlying asset Bitcoin. So now. Isn't Coinbase going to launch some of these major custodial services? And what about BitGo as well? I think that they handle these types of things as well. Do you think that they're not quite ready to handle the underlying asset in the billions and stuff like that? The custodial services for that. Do you think that BitGo and Coinbase maybe not ready yet? And if not, when do you think that we will be ready for that type of custodial?
So I'm under the impression that BitGo acquired, is it Freedom Trust, was it? And Coinbase is coming out with a service, and they aren't fully deployed yet. So I don't think that these are production level services that are accepting clients. But this is the idea, right? I know that the Winklevi ETF proposal that was rejected, I know one of the main flaws when you hang out, like I've been involved in Lightning development and been having a blast trying to get the community behind it. But, Maller's Family Thanksgiving is actually all finance, all ETF, Bitcoin talk, futures, CME, and everyone involved in that industry thought there's no way the SEC is going to allow anyone, get an ETF proposal accepted, knowing that no one knows how they're going to store that much Bitcoin. The last time that much Bitcoin stored, GOX goes down. It's an absolute disaster. There needs to be thought behind that. So Coinbase, BitGo, these services are coming. And, when you see a CME product is cash settled, this also addressed it. I mean, CME could have settled the underlying. But I don't think the industry's ready. I also don't think that's why you're seeing a ton of volume. Is a lot of these really large institutions and endowments and firms are really scared to hold large amounts of the underlying. That type of stuff scares them, is that they don't get any rollbacks, and that, unlike other blockchains in the industry, Bitcoin is immutable, right? And that scares them. So I know there's a lot of work going on in the financial side of Bitcoin on allowing these institutions to sign up for custodial services and hold Bitcoin large amounts. So I would be shocked if Bitcoin didn't have a serious ETF proposal that had a large chance of getting accepted. I never thought the Winklevi one had a chance. But I think in the next 12 months, when these services start to crop up and you start to see firms trading Bitcoin trading desks and trading in the futures market and other products, maybe options can hopefully come soon, that you'll start to see real serious ETF proposals. Now, whether or not you can form your own conspiracy on whether the SEC will deny them because they would like to suppress Bitcoin, that's probably a valid conspiracy, and I think that's a different conversation. But will the industry be ready, and will the services allow really large sums of money, where how you go from $150 billion market cap to 1.5 trillion and 5 trillion, and allow these type of financial services? I think that the industry will be ready in the next 12 to 24 months for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. The immutability, Jack, is what scares them. It's what scares them, because when you lose Bitcoin, it's gone, and there's nothing that you can do. There's no government to go to. There's no helpline to call. This is the new digital gold. So, Pierre, let's get Pierre's thoughts on this. Pierre, what are your thoughts on the conversation so far about Goldman and them being super afraid of immutability? And what about BCH? Are we going to get any type of financial assets on BCH anytime soon?
I'm not even going to talk about BCH. Come on. So for Goldman, I think that it really is a matter of acclimating themselves to this new environment. And so there's the cash settled futures. There's also LedgerX's product, which is physically settled. And so I think that would probably be the next logical step if they, so, we were talking about the custodians, and that's a really interesting conversation. BitGo acquired Kingdom Trust, and Kingdom Trust was kind of a traditional finance firm. And so I think that we'll see transactions like that, where it's either Bitcoin companies acquiring traditional finance companies, or traditional finance companies acquiring Bitcoin companies, or traditional finance companies internally developing that expertise. And so I think that it'll get really serious in the custodian space when people find, or traditional finance companies find out how much players like Coinbase are making off of this custodian product. I think Coinbase is charging like $100,000 just to sign up on day one. So I think that the day we hear or see a headline of BNY Mellon launches Bitcoin custodian product, that's when you know that we'll have arrived in the custodian game. And so someone like BNY, the huge advantage there is that they've already onboarded every large financial institution. And so this is just an additional product in their lineup. And these financial institutions, they have like their own, let's call them protocols between each other, but the old school way of doing things. And so once we have physical ownership of Bitcoins and custodianship is squared away, that does open up ETF, but that also opens up asset-backed lending. And I know Francis has been working on this as well in Canada. And I think that, I listened to the Noted podcast with Chiefy. He's working on this in Africa, because asset-backed lending is going to be huge, both from a selfish point of view of Bitcoiners not wanting to have to sell their Bitcoins to get fiat, and thus incurring, capital gains and all that. But also, I think that it plays a huge economic role in Bitcoin's next evolution, and what I foresee happening, which is speculative attacks, where people are going to be using Bitcoin as collateral and borrowing against it. And the way they're going to be borrowing is they're borrowing fiat from the banking system. And the banking system, when it lends out fiat, it prints new money, right? That's the entire premise of fractional reserve banking. And so you have a positive feedback loop there for Bitcoin, where these banks are printing new fiat, and the borrowers are out there either buying more Bitcoins or not selling Bitcoins. And so I think that it will drive the price up to astronomical levels, far beyond what we've seen so far. But that might be in 5 years, it might be in 10 years, but this is really laying the groundwork, the foundations for that. And these are all puzzle pieces that need to be put in place before we can start seeing some serious action.
Very interesting points. Let me ask you real quick, Pierre, just a follow-up question. I don't know if you've heard of SALT,
Yes.
the token. Does is that something that that could maybe play a role in this? Because you mentioned not wanting to actually sell your underlying asset.
Yeah, so they're essentially doing that, but they're like small fry, right? And they're doing it in a way, I think that they're trying to be too cypherpunk about it. And ultimately, when you're doing asset-backed lending and you're lending out fiat, like there's nothing cypherpunk about that. Like you're dealing with government money, and that's just so. I think that integrating with the traditional financial system, and then the other thing too is that SALT is not printing new fiat like a fractional reserve bank is, and so you don't have the positive feedback loop. They're borrowing that fiat from somewhere. I think that it usually has to do with margin trading, or I don't know what the exact source of their fiat funding is, but yeah. So while they're onto the right idea, I'm more excited about seeing traditional financial institutions get in this game, and they're doing it like, as Andy was saying, like it's the profit motive. They see money to be made from lending, and they'll lend against anything, as we saw with the 2008 financial crisis. Like as long as they can get their fee and they can get their interest spread, they'll do it. And so I think that through this model of asset-backed lending with a fractional reserve banking system, it's kind of a game of judo where we're using their own weight against them. And I'm excited about seeing that evolve over the coming years.
Awesome analogy too, man. Really great stuff. I don't think though, Pierre, that you can ever be too cypherpunk. I don't think that's possible. So let's go with Francis next. Maybe you can comment a little bit on Pierre's comments of asset-backed lending. But what are your thoughts so far on the conversation, Francis, and Goldman news?
Wow, tough act to follow. I think everybody kind of knocked it out of the park. But incredibly enough, I do have stuff to add on this topic. Although, I mean, everything so far has been fantastic. So, just kind of a few thoughts here and there. Like regarding the actual ownership of Bitcoin versus like Bitcoin derivatives, where we're gambling on the price. Like I've actually been involved in a lot of projects because I advise a lot of projects on these kind of things. And since bills, we kind of suck up a lot of liquidity in Canada. When someone is looking for like liquidity OTC, like for real, like they actually come to us, right? So we actually get like legit requests. And there are a lot of people that are actually in their strategy, their financial instrument strategy, like actually holding Bitcoin. So there's a lot of funds, there's a lot of hedge funds. Like for example, the TMX, the Toronto like stock exchange group, announced last month that they were going to start an OTC brokerage for Bitcoin. And from my understanding and my talks with the community there, it looks like for real, people are going to be calling like the Toronto Stock Exchange or one of their subsidiaries to do OTC Bitcoin trading for liquidity and have actual settlement of the Bitcoins for whatever purposes. So also because the investors at my consulting firm is Grant Thornton, I got into a weird thing where I'm like a crypto auditor now. I audit like people's crypto holdings with Grant Thornton. So we do actually see a lot of companies that are traded on the stock market own a lot of crypto as part of their business model. And there are also a lot of hedge funds that now want to own Bitcoin before all the Bitcoins are mined, right? So a lot of people are actually looking to hold those things. Regarding custody, I think all the comments were absolutely fantastic regarding that. It is one of the huge challenges, but also one of the biggest opportunities in this space, I think, for the year 2018 and for the following year, for people in our community. Custody right now, as I said, people are actually owning cryptocurrency, and the people who are doing it themselves are doing it in a bad way, a lot of them in a bad way. And also, you know, a lot of people are using the companies that we named as their custodians. If ever you see a company that's, you know, a custodian of Ether, Litecoin, and Bitcoin exclusively, and those three together, you know it's Coinbase, right? Who's their custodian, because this is the three products that they offer. What I think is kind of weird is like those companies that are custodians, you know, they're also going to be, you know, competing with the other companies who they can offer custodial services to. So, you know, Coinbase can offer financial products. You know, it seems like BitGo, as we said, is looking into using financial products. So, like from the point of view of third-party firms, like using Coinbase or Xapo or BitGo, it's kind of weird. It's kind of like the apps using BitPay in their backend. So what I see is like really a huge opportunity for people to develop like those do-it-yourself solutions in a really easy to understand way. And these people are going to be the Bitcoin experts, the security researchers, the adversarial-minded people. So I see definitely custodianship as like huge opportunity to work within those companies to develop their custodial solutions themselves. Custody is also a huge regulatory issue. For example, if you're in a country, you might need to have the custody physically in that country, and you know the well-known custodians might not be in your country, so that might be a problem there. So that's definitely something to fix. In regards to one thing I say though, like one of the big obstacles, which was auditing and proof of ownership of the funds, that has kind of been solved. Like, so we're definitely able to a large degree do financial statement audits of people's Bitcoin on the books. This is something that we have done at Galaxy. So we're going to also open source our tools to do that, because we want them to become like proof of ownership standards in the auditing industry. But this is another problem that's solved. So if you're a fund and you need to show that you have crypto on the books, or if you're mining Bitcoin and you need to prove that you didn't sell them, for example, it's becoming quite easy to have that legal recognition of ownership. And you know, final kind of thoughts that I had on that. So regarding the SEC, like one of the main issues of regulators is, okay, so say that you buy like $100 million of Bitcoin, like you're going to manipulate the market. So you need to show us your strategy to accumulate those Bitcoins and use that liquidity without manipulating or moving the market. So this is a requirement that regulators have specifically asked, like applying funds to explain their strategy in detail. So you can definitely tell that they're kind of, you know, worried about the effect that those things may have on price, and that seems to be one of the core issues. So I think like regarding like Goldman and that kind of stuff, I think that's kind of all I had to say. On that topic. I'm quite excited to get into the Tim Draper price prediction topic as a follow-up, but I think I covered everything, unless Vortex, you think I missed something?
No, that sounds good to me.
Can I add a few things, Vortex?
Please. Yeah, please. And real quick before you do, Andy, I just want to let you guys know that we are kind of running a little bit over, so we're not going to do the Draper topic, because we talked a lot, pretty bullish already about Bitcoin, but we're going to go with Andy first, and then after that, I would like to maybe go one by one and see if I can get a comment on Paul Puey's comment from last week. So that should be fun. Andy, go ahead, take it away.
Right. First, I'll just say, you know, I think one of the things that gets out there is common knowledge is that we can never have ETFs. You know, the Wall Street is worried because of custodianship. And, you know, I think that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, first of all, in the stock world, not only do people have to deal with the whole issue of stock certificates that, you know, that used to be held by brokers and no one complained about that, but now the vast majority of stocks are held in street name. I mean, it would be almost like if you assigned your Bitcoin, instead of being Vortex's Bitcoin, it was Goldman Sachs's Bitcoin. So it has nothing to do with custodianship. They'll figure it out. I mean, anyone could. I mean, it's not like if let's say Goldman Sachs had their own custodian or Wells Fargo, like it's going to get lost. I mean, these are the biggest institutions in the world. They'll guard it without doing it on a tracer. It's not really a big deal. It's just a matter of the sector wasn't big enough for them to care enough to do anything about it. And just when it got big enough, then the sector crashed. So they really didn't have any interest. And now that it's starting to move up again, they will get back into it. I mean, again, remember, this GBTC has been around forever. I mean, that's a major. I mean, I forgot how much they have, but we found out when they were doing their whole Bcash split, they have like, how many Bitcoins was it? Like, 500,000 or some unbelievable amount. No one's complaining about their custodianship, and they've been a publicly listed stock forever. So I'm not worried on, as far as, we're talking about, well, who's going to do it first? Will Coinbase do it? And they're charging $100,000 for the privilege. I mean, to me, Coinbase is to trading of Bitcoin or retail, as like BitPay is to payment processing. It's a dinosaur that no one has any interest in. There'll be many other competitors that'll do it much better and not charge $100,000 for it. I'm not worried about custodianship at all. That'll get figured out quite easily when institutions really want to own it.
All right, great points, Andy. Though I guess I will say that, yeah, it's going to be pretty crazy right now because we are so early, in the Bitcoin technology world. But like you say, GBTC seems to be pulling it off, and I haven't heard any hacks from them yet. So I guess we'll have to stay tuned and keep posted with GBTC. But before we go with asking, I would like to get Andy's comments and Jack's comments and Pierre's comments on the show from last week on Paul Puey's comments. But before we do that, I'd like to go to Francis first because he would like to comment on Tim Draper's $250,000 per Bitcoin prediction. Take it away, Francis.
Yeah, and also, unfortunately, I didn't see last week's show, so I don't have much to say on that. Sorry about that. But I just want to talk about that real quick. So what Tim Draper did is absolutely incredible. It's awesome. So what he did is on the side of Draper University, he actually put a huge poster. I don't know how to say the word in English, huge thing saying Tim Draper predicts Bitcoin 250K in 2022. So that's as bold as a statement as you can get. And if you read Nassim Taleb's book out there, since Draper is a huge holder of it with skin in the game, I think it's a fantastic message to really put that out there so he can tell people in a few years, you can't say I didn't tell you so. It was in pretty bold letters. So I just want to say how to get to this number. How can you calculate using a really logical way to get to this number, which may seem incredible, which is not at all incredible. So I think this may have been part of Tim's thinking, although obviously, I don't know how he came up with that number, but this is how I can come up with the exact same number, more or less at the exact same time. So really simply, and this is the fundamentals of Bitcoin, all you have to do is look at the halving. All right, so the first halving happened in November 30th, 2012. And about 400 days after the halving, you had the peak, the all-time high. And that all-time high, about 400 days after the halving, was about 30x the size of the all-time high. So I think it was the first halving that was $1,000, $1,200, and then the previous high there was about $30 or something like that. And then you look at 575 days after the next halving that happened in December that happened in July 10th, 2016. You see the highest peak after that is about 570 days after the latest halving. And that peak, which was the 19,000, 20,000 peak, is about 20 times higher than the previous peak, which was our $1,200. And then, so if you just extrapolate going on, looking at the halving and looking at about 570 days, 670 days, something like that, after the next halving, and if you estimate, after the first halving, it was a 30x increase in the peak. The second halving, it was about a 20x increase since the previous peak. So you say, okay, next halving is going to be May 31st, 2020. So let's look at about 600 days after that, 650 days after that. You've got the beginning of 2022. Let's just go ahead and pick a 15 times increase since the previous peak. The first time it was 30, then it was 20.
Being conservative, we'll just do 15x.
Let's go ahead with 15, and you get 19,000 times 15 or 19,000 times 10 or something like that. So using the same ratio of distance between the halving and the peaks and the increase of the peaks, you arrive at about $250,000 in the beginning of 2022. So to me, that's something that makes logical sense, and I hope that we can't really deduce that from these really two experiences, right? We don't have enough experience in Bitcoin over time to know how the price reacts to halving. These are very, very biased, small sample, but using that logic, we get to this number, and it seems perfectly rational to me.
Yep. And I think a lot of people that are, in the space might have seen that, might have done the math and looked at the fact that gold is trillions and trillions of dollars of market caps. And then derivatives are hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars, just ridiculous stuff, all built up on paper. And yeah, it does not seem too far-fetched to think that an actual limited asset, an asset that's limited in value, could reach those heights, especially with the amount of utility that Bitcoin does provide. So great points, Francis. Again, you guys might want to rewind that if it was a little bit too fast, but definitely check that out because the math does check out. So let's go with Jack next. Jack, so I don't know if you caught the show, but I would just still like to have your comments on this from the last show that we did with Paul Puey, where he did say that Litecoin could in fact turn out to be possibly an altcoin. So I kind of want to see what your thoughts, both yours and Pierre's thoughts on that. So go ahead and Jack, take it away. Yeah.
I think you said Litecoin. I think you meant Lightning Network as an altcoin. No, I just wanted to
That's
clarify.
what I meant. Yeah, the Lightning Network as an altcoin. Sorry, not Litecoin.
Yeah, to be honest, I did catch it. And to be honest with you, I wish I had more to say. It is a very bizarre comment. And I know I just bumped my head kind of hard, but I'm really having a tough time putting it all together. And I also I've heard great things about Paul, and I also do not want to, talk down on any remarks without him being here to defend himself. So in no way am I trying to, be disrespectful towards Paul, but in the discussion, it sounded more of a user experience issue, and how this protocol is going to look to the end consumer and their relationship with it. And claiming that the Lightning Network, what Lightning Network coins, I don't even remember the exact quote, but the Lightning Network is an altcoin, is a factual statement, that it's true or false. And I don't even know how you can justify such a thing. I mean, you're using Bitcoin, multi-sig transactions, there's a protocol to update channel state. So in regards to, is it an altcoin? It's a really bizarre thing to say. I really don't understand how you can justify it, and I wish I had more to say on it. But the actual discussion of the show sounded like user experience, like having multiple balances and channels, and our users going to have to understand what a channel is. I think it was really well timed that Lightning Labs wrote this piece on, the end goal user experience that is in the foreseeable future that I hope everyone checked out. They published it on their blog. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, things like managing off-chain and on-chain balance, things like managing network connectivity, things like managing, which nodes are online, things like, constantly chain watching, so that, if a party tries to cheat, or if a node is backing up and, misses channel state, and old state gets published, all of these things, the end goal is to not have users, be mentally managing any of this at all. And the end goal is very similar to the user experiences. I don't think the goal is to totally change how people pay for things at the mall. It's the underlying that we're trying to change. But I think the user experience is very similar to Square Cash, very similar to a lot of these apps where you get a QR code, you scan it, and you move on. So I think the user experience shouldn't be a problem. We're super early. There's a lot of Zap, for example, Lightning Labs wallets aren't even mainnet yet. There's a few things that we're waiting on. So it's super early. But I know that a lot of people like Paul are concerned of the user experience, and rightfully so. There's a lot of work to do. And I also welcome people like Paul to come into the Slack channels and the IRC chats, because this is what we discuss. And, all questions can be met with conversation if there are concerns. And there are people like myself that work on this type of problems. But as far as the actual statement that it's an altcoin, I don't know. And he was given a chance to kind of back away from it or maybe rephrase, and he stuck to his guns and he spat it out again, and I have no idea how to justify that. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
I appreciate the comment, Jack. Yeah, because I was a bit befuddled myself. I mean, he actually kind of steered the conversation away from and kind of made me lose my train of thought a little bit. I'm not exactly a professional interviewer per se, more of a developer. But yeah, it was interesting, and I'm like you say, Jack. I'm glad that that we could have these discussions and stuff like that, so people can make their own judgments. But go ahead, Jack.
And it's super. I think it's super interesting, actually, instead of like debating and then questioning motives, like if someone's secretly holding Bcash or something ridiculous, I think like the actual discussion of Lightning user experience is interesting and is one of the reasons why I continue to spend time that I have to Zap in trying to get people motivated into thinking about how this protocol is going to look and feel and how Bitcoin will be used for the next X amount of years, how we want that to look, and what problems we want to solve there. And if you actually read some of the pieces like that Aaron wrote that you mentioned, or the blog posts that Lightning Labs and Elizabeth and Brian released, I mean, there's a lot of really complex ideas that people are spending a lot of time on. And it just takes conversation with the community. And, you know, all of this is happening publicly. You don't need an invite. And there's really, really cool work done, you know, all the way from that like L2 paper, which is, you know, updates to the Bitcoin protocol to make things like watchtowers, you know, easier and you know, symmetric channel states and stuff like that, all the way to like very simple user experience stuff like new SPV clients, you know, how even what color we want to display balances. Do we show, I talked to the Lightning Labs application engineer all the time, you know, do you want to show channel balance and wallet balance? Should we combine them, you know, and testing out new things, and all work in between is really interesting. So I think Paul should just come and discuss, because as I think Paul, you know, runs a wallet service himself, it's interesting. And it is itself like a really interesting problem that is going to get ironed out over the next X amount of time. So yeah, I thought the discussion should be more focused there. Saying that the Lightning Network is an altcoin is just false, and I don't understand.
Yeah. See, and we made some good points there, you know, because this is early days, as I try to tell everybody, and it is we are discussing this user experience, and it's very important that we get this user experience right. So we are trying to have a discussion about this, but it's very important to differentiate, you know, draw a line between having a discussion about user experience and distorting facts. And I think, you know, Shanobi did a great article on that. I don't have it linked in my show notes, but Mr. Shanobi over there, Brian from Block Digest, did in fact actually write a whole Medium post to thwart, you know, a bunch of comments that Paul has made, to correct a bunch of comments that Paul's made. So I encourage everybody to check that out, because, you know, we do want to make sure we have this discussion. But again, guys, let's make sure we don't distort facts, because, you know, Lightning Network is, you know, it is Bitcoin transactions. It is Bitcoin smart contracts, which use Bitcoin primitives. You know, we were talking about nlock time, time lock, hash lock. I mean, a transaction on Lightning Network, if using a Bitcoin channel, is in fact a Bitcoin transaction. You know, Lightning Network is not a separate currency. It's not really not even a payment network. It's just a network that's you know, that's updating channels constantly and just passing around unsigned Bitcoin transactions. You know, it's not an IOU. It's not an IOU. It is a cryptographically secured payment channel locked to Bitcoin's blockchain. So, you know, I just wanted to make sure that everybody, you know, sort of understands that and gets that locked in, because we do want to have a discussion about how we display balances and user experience and stuff like that. But I encourage everybody to please check out that article from Brian Shanobi over there at Block Digest. Pierre, let's see if we can get your thoughts on Paul Puey's comments. And again, I'm not trying to, you know, do a hack job or anything on Paul. I just kind of wanted to have a quick little one-off on what people think, you know, on his comments, because again, it's about the discussion. So go ahead, Pierre.
So this isn't, I actually don't think this is Paul's fault or faulty reasoning at all. I think that it's actually symptomatic of a wider problem, which is that we use the same word, Bitcoin, for the money and for the payment network. And that's hugely confusing from an analytical point of view, because those are two orthogonal things, even though they're highly related from a technical perspective. From an economic perspective, they're actually very different, and payment systems compete with each other on very different grounds than monies. So I think that Paul is correct in the sense that, and I think that your statement that Lightning is not a separate payment network, while is true on a highly technical level, that these are just transactions that they're Bitcoin transactions that have been signed and have not been broadcasted. I think that from a economic perspective, it is a separate payment network in the sense that it has different properties than on-chain Bitcoin transactions that are broadcasted and are recorded in blocks. So in that regard, like, I would grant that it is a different payment network than the Bitcoin on-chain payment network with different properties. it is anchored in the Bitcoin payment network and entirely reliant on it for its security guarantees. But it has different security guarantees in the Bitcoin payment network, and crucially, a different user experience. And that's okay. Like when you think about like this would be a bigger problem if Bitcoin payment network adoption was like 80% of merchants already, and now we were going out and saying, okay, you got to change all of your systems, and we've got to change it all to Lightning. Like we've barely got like 0.001% merchant adoption. Them having their user experience changed like today is not a problem. Like we're going to onboard a lot more merchants, and that's, to me, like that's kind of a weak argument against Lightning. Now, I think that what the controversy is that is Bitcoins on Lightning Network a different money than Bitcoins on the Bitcoin payments network? And I think it would be absurd to try to argue that they're a different money from an economic perspective. So I think that when people hear, oh, Lightning coins are an altcoin, they think that Paul is implying that these coins are economically different and thus are trading at a different value. And so, like, you know, when you go check out at a merchant, they'll be like, this costs either 1 Bitcoin or 1.3 Lightning coins. You know, like, you'll never see that kind of disparity. That would be a stupid thing for a merchant to do. Like, these things trade one-to-one. You could accuse it of being like a Bitcoin stable coin, you know, if you really want to say something kind of dumb but not completely idiotic. But no, they are money. From a monetary perspective, they are Bitcoins. From a technical perspective, they're tightly integrated with the Bitcoin payment network. And then, you know, just from a payments perspective, it's two separate payment networks with different properties. And we should celebrate both.
Awesome, Pierre. Thank you so much for that breakdown. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think what you said is essentially, you know, it's a network of multi-sigs, right? You can't span Lightning separate. You know, nobody's going to say Lightning, one Lightning or one Bitcoin, right? They are multi-sig together. So very good points, Pierre. Thank you so much for that. I think we can end it here unless anybody has any final comments.
Yeah, I didn't get my final comments.
Oh, sorry, Andy. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think kind of dumb, but not completely idiotic is an understatement for my view of what that conversation was, how it went down the rabbit hole of FUD on an incredibly ridiculous statement. Bitcoin is Bitcoin. It doesn't matter where you're trading it or how you're trading it, it's Bitcoin. So that's the end of my story. I thought that was a lot of wasted time on something that is ultimately a non-event. The other thing I, of course, bring up, given my background, is that $250,000 price prediction, which, again, we're talking about 2022. It is now 2018, and we are getting ready.
Oh, no. He just dropped out. Oh, sorry, Andy. It's probably the NSA. Andy, you can't be talking that good about Bitcoin without the NSA going to cut you off. So. Too bullish. Okay, sorry, Andy, you dropped out. Go ahead.
Am I back?
Yep, you're back. Go ahead. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I said in 2022 we're going to be discounting the 2024 halving, and $250,000 Bitcoin would be a $4.4 trillion market cap, which would just be about half of the value of the gold and silver in the world. So to me, that is a completely reasonable prediction for given what we expect Bitcoin to be in 2022. I find absolutely nothing hyperbolic about that.
Great point, Andy. Yep, absolutely. And as Andy said, you guys can all do the math, all check it out. You know, every day that Bitcoin succeeds, you know, every day that Bitcoin is not hacked, every day that Bitcoin continues to put out a transaction a block every 10 minutes is just that much closer to Bitcoin never, ever going away. So it just strengthens it every single day, 24/7 as it's out there in the open on the internet. As Andreas describes it, a sewer rat, collecting all the diseases and stuff like that when going up against the bubble boys of the traditional banking system. So great comments, Andy. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. We really, really appreciate you. We hope we hope you guys learned something today. Thank you so much, everybody, for everybody in the chat and everybody, in the comments. We really appreciate it. Let's go ahead and say goodbye to our guests and find out where we can find out more information about them. Andy, where can we find out more about you?
All right, CryptoGoldCentral.com, at Andy_Hoppman_CG, and of course, the World Crypto Network.
Yes, sir. Awesome. If you guys like the show, again, please hit the thumbs up. We have Andy on the WCN, and we have a lot of great content for you guys. So let's go to Francis. Francis, where can we find out more about you?
You should definitely follow me on Twitter, which is where I hang out the most. So my handle is @FrancisPouliot. There's an underscore. Actually, I found out the @FrancisPouliot account without the underscore is me. In 2018, I tweeted like 3 super dumb, like 17-year-old tweets. I lost it. That's not me, but look for the blue check mark, please. And you can also follow me on Medium. I'm going on vacation finally after years. I'm renting a house on an island where no one can find me. I'll send photos, but I'm gonna try to write like a blog post a day. I'm gonna try to like pull off a Jimmy, write some articles and like get some stuff on paper. So follow me on Medium. I'm gonna be posting a lot of stuff in the next few months.
Yeah, that Jimmy Song, man, he's a never-ending source of information. He's doing, he's part of an investment company. He's doing his own stuff. He's splitting coins for people. He's writing posts. So yeah, he's one of the hardest working men in crypto. So awesome, Francis. We're looking forward to those articles. Very, very cool. I will definitely be giving those a retweet. Let's go to Jack. Jack, where can we find out more about you, sir?
I hang out online. I'll be on Twitter, Slack, and IRC, the Lightning Slack. And IRC. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to contact. So if you ever need to contact me, just ping me on some medium online.
You bet. You bet. If you guys are, working with the Lightning Network, or you're trying to do tests and you're trying to build out this stuff, Jack is a great resource. So definitely reach out to him. He'll be more than happy, I'm sure, to help you guys out. And again, this is a community. We're all trying to build this thing together, build Bitcoin and Lightning together. Pierre, where can we find out more about you, sir? Oh, you're muted. No. There we go.
I'm on Twitter @Pierre_Rochard. I co-host the Noted podcast with Bitstein. Follow him on Twitter as well @BITSTEIN. And we also co-founded the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. So go to nakamotoinstitute.org. I've written some blog posts on our blog called the Mempool. So go check those out. I talk about speculative attacks on there and kind of lay it out. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Pierre, I got to say, you guys, you got to follow Pierre. He is the world's best shit poster on Twitter. I love it. I love it. All your tweets, man. Very awesome stuff. And I guess might as well plug BTCPayServer as well. Check them out at twitter.com/BTCPayServer. You will find their information there, including YouTube videos on how to get started. It's really great. I mean, there's a lot of great resources on how to get this set up and going for your company. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. We really, really appreciate it. We hope you guys learned something. We will, of course, be back here next Sunday. We try to do a new Bitcoin news show every Sunday. And joining us next Sunday will be Andrew DeSantis. So it will just be a more of a one-on-one type of situation where we will definitely go down the rabbit hole. So hope you guys join us for that. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. We hope to see you next time. And until next time, keep talking Bitcoin. See you guys later.
Later.